Have you ever felt like your own mind was working against you? Maybe you've noticed the same toxic patterns repeating in your life, or certain thoughts that seem to trap you no matter what you do. Carl Jung believed there are hidden places in the psyche that can destroy us if we don't recognize them. In this video, we'll explore 10 dangerous psychological places you need to be aware of and how to navigate them. Stay with me until the end, because understanding these will change the way you see yourself forever. These are the Jungian mind traps, the archetypal pitfalls that have ensnared human beings since the dawn of consciousness. They are ancient, powerful, and utterly indifferent to your well-being. Ignoring them is not an option. It's a silent surrender to chaos and dissolution. This exploration will demand courage. It requires a willingness to look at the parts of yourself you would rather deny, to confront the darkness that you pretend isn't there. This is the fundamental task of individuation, of becoming who you truly are, to integrate the fragmentation of the self into a coherent, resilient, and meaningful whole. So, take a deep breath. The journey begins now. The first and perhaps most formidable of these places is the dragon in the dungeon and the price of ignorance, the shadow. What is the shadow? Well, in the simplest terms, it is everything you are but have decided not to be. It is the repository for all the impulses, desires, weaknesses and capacities that your conscious ego has rejected. It's the part of you that society, your family and you yourself have deemed unacceptable, uncivilized or shameful. It's the anger you swallow, the envy you deny, the primitive aggression you pretend you don't possess. It is the dragon you have locked away in the dungeon of your psyche, hoping it will simply starve and disappear. But dragons, as we know from mythology, do not simply disappear. You see, the ego strives for an ideal. It wants to be good, competent and loved. To maintain this pristine image, it must perform a psychological triage, sorting aspects of the self into acceptable and unacceptable piles. The unacceptable is cast into the darkness, repressed and disowned. You might tell yourself, I'm not an angry person, or I could never be that cruel. And in doing so, you are feeding the shadow. You are giving it the very substance of your being that you refuse to acknowledge. It grows stronger in the dark, nourished by your denial, waiting for a moment of weakness, a crack in the castle wall, to emerge. This process begins in childhood. A boy is told, boys don't cry, and so he banishes his vulnerability to the shadow. A girl is told to be nice and agreeable, so her assertiveness and rage are exiled. We construct our conscious personality, our persona, by systematically amputating parts of our whole self. But these amputated limbs don't vanish, they fester. They become a source of psychic infection. The energy that rightly belongs to them doesn't dissipate. It turns sour, malevolent even. And the more you insist on your own light, your own goodness, the longer and darker your shadow grows behind you, unbeknownst to you. The danger, then, is that the shadow does not remain passive. It seeks expression, and because it has been denied a conscious and constructive outlet, it erupts in volcanic, destructive ways. It's the good man who suddenly explodes in a fit of uncontrollable rage. It's the saintly woman who engages in vicious gossip. It's the inexplicable acts of self-sabotage that ruin your most important relationships or career opportunities. This isn't someone else acting through you, this you. It is the disowned part of yourself, starved for recognition, finally breaking its chains and wreaking havoc on the kingdom you've so carefully built. The consequences of a neglected shadow are not merely personal, they are projected outward onto the world with devastating effect. When you refuse to see the darkness in yourself, you have no choice but to see it in others. This is the psychological mechanism of projection. The faults you cannot accept in your own character become the defining characteristics of your neighbor, your political opponent, or the other group. They become the scapegoat upon whom you heap all the sins you have refused to acknowledge in your own heart. You see the splinter in your brother's eye because you cannot bear to look at the log in your own. This is the psychological root of so much conflict, from petty arguments to outright war. We create demons out of other people so that we can maintain our own illusion of righteousness. The more vehemently you deny your own capacity for malevolence, the more monstrous your enemies will appear. You are not fighting another human being at that point. You are fighting your own disowned shadow, externalized and embodied in another. And there is no end to the cruelty a person can justify when they believe they are fighting pure evil, all the while blind to the fact that the evil they see is a mirror of their own unexamined soul. On a personal level, the unintegrated shadow leads to a life of profound inauthenticity and depletion. It takes a tremendous amount of psychic energy to keep that dungeon door bolted. Energy that could be used for creative work, for building relationships, for living a full and vibrant life, is instead consumed by the constant, exhausting work of repression. You feel drained, brittle and hollow because a significant part of your vital life force is bound up in this internal prison. You become a caricature of yourself, playing a role rather than living a life. The spontaneity and wholeness that define a psychologically healthy individual are lost. The path out of this trap is not to destroy the shadow. That is impossible and, in fact, undesirable. The path is integration. It is the courageous act of turning to face the dragon. It's the process of shadow work, of consciously and humbly looking at your projections, your slips of the tongue, your moments of irrational anger or judgment and asking, what part of me is this? It is to realize that within the shadow, buried with the monsters, is also your own unlived life, your strength, your creativity, your vitality. To reclaim the shadow is to reclaim your own wholeness and to take the first, most crucial step toward becoming the individual you were meant to be. If you're finding this breakdown helpful, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next deep dive. The second place, the mask that becomes the face, and the suffocation of the true self, intimately related to the first, is the persona. The persona is your social mask. It is the face you present to the world, the accommodating employee, the dutiful son, the sophisticated intellectual, the cheerful friend. It is a necessary and functional part of the psyche, a compromise between your individual identity and the demands of society. It allows us to navigate complex social interactions with a degree of smoothness and predictability. Without a persona, we would be raw, unfiltered beings, likely incapable of functioning in a civilized collective. It is, in essence, our psychological clothing. The problem, however, is not the existence of the mask, but our relationship to it. The danger arises when we forget that we are wearing one. It's when the actor becomes so lost in the role that he forgets his own identity off stage. This is the trap of over-identification with the persona. You begin to believe that you, the mask. The successful doctor starts to believe he is nothing but his professional competence. The nurturing mother forgets that she is also a woman with her own needs and desires, separate from her maternal role. The mask fuses to the skin, and the true face beneath begins to atrophy from lack of use. This over-identification is seductive because the persona is often rewarded by society. The world praises your professional success, your social grace, your unwavering strength. These accolades are intoxicating. They reinforce the value of the mask, making it feel safer and more desirable than the complex, messy, and often contradictory reality of the true self. Why would you want to be the uncertain, flawed individual when you can be the polished, universally approved of role? And so you invest more and more of your psychic energy into maintaining and perfecting this outward facade, this curated public self. But a terrible price is paid for this bargain. As the persona becomes all-consuming, the connection to the deeper self, the true center of your being, begins to wither. A creeping sense of emptiness, falseness, and meaninglessness sets in. You might have all the external trappings of success, the career, the family, the social standing, but you feel like an imposter in your own life. You are playing a part so perfectly that you no longer know who you are when the curtain falls. This is the suffocation of the soul, a quiet death that happens behind a smiling, successful mask. When the persona dominates, your life becomes rigid and brittle. You lose the capacity for spontaneity, for genuine emotional expression, for authentic connection with others. Every interaction is mediated through the mask, every response calculated to uphold the role. You can no longer simply, you must always. This creates a profound sense of isolation, because if people only love your mask, then you are, in a fundamental sense, completely alone. They are not connecting with you, but with the carefully constructed artifice you present. This is a lonely and terrifying predicament. Furthermore, this over-identification makes you extraordinarily vulnerable to life's vicissitudes. If your entire identity is invested in being a successful CEO, what happens when you lose your job? If you are only the perfect husband, what happens when your marriage fails? The collapse of the external role precipitates a complete collapse of the self. Because you have no other foundation to stand on, no deeper identity to fall back on, the loss of the mask feels like annihilation. This is why people can fall into a profound depression or have a complete breakdown after a professional failure or a divorce. The persona has been shattered, and they have forgotten the person who was underneath. The inner world also rebels against this tyranny of the persona. The neglected parts of the self, the shadow, the anima or animus, the instincts, do not stay quiet. They build up pressure, like steam in a sealed boiler. This can manifest as anxiety, depression, strange moods, and physical symptoms with no apparent cause. The soul is crying out for attention, signaling that the one-sidedness of your life is unsustainable. It's a desperate attempt by the psyche to break the stranglehold of the persona and force you to acknowledge the totality of your being, not just the socially acceptable slice you've chosen to display. Escaping this trap requires the conscious and deliberate act of removing the mask, at least in private. It means cultivating a space through journaling, meditation, therapy, or trusted relationships, where you can be your whole unedited self. It requires asking the terrifying question, who am I without my job title, without my social roles, without the approval of others? It's a process of rediscovering the true face beneath the persona, of honoring the full spectrum of your personality. It is not about destroying the persona, but about putting it in its proper place, as a useful tool for navigating the world, not as the master of your soul. Sometimes exploring the depths of the mind can feel overwhelming. If you've ever felt like you're carrying too much internally, talking to a professional can help. Here is an online therapy platform you can access anytime, from anywhere. Use the link in the description and the code therapy20 to get 20% off your first month. The third place, Overwhelm of the collective unconscious, the siren song of the crowd, and anchoring the individual soul. Overwhelm of the collective unconscious, so vast it can swallow you whole. Jung described it as a deep ocean beneath our personal unconscious, filled with ancient archetypes and patterns. Your conscious mind is a small boat on this immense sea. Most days, you navigate familiar waters, but sometimes a storm arises, a movement, a crowd, a cause. The collective promises belonging, certainty, and relief from the burden of individuality. But if you surrender, you lose your moorings. You stop thinking for yourself, swept away by the passions of the crowd. The answer isn't to deny the ocean, but to build a stronger boat. Anchor yourself in your own values and navigate with your own moral compass. Only then can you withstand the storm and remain truly yourself. And if you're learning something new so far, a quick like goes a long way to support the channel. Let's come to the fourth place. The Trickster archetype, the chaos within the gates and harnessing the sacred fool. The Trickster archetype is a saboteur within your own psyche, a primordial figure found in every culture. Loki, Coyote, Hermes, the boundary crosser, the rule breaker, the jester who speaks uncomfortable truths. He shatters rigidities, exposes hypocrisies, and opens the door to renewal. But when unacknowledged, he sabotages your best efforts, whispering, "Why bother? It's all a joke anyway." He thrives on the collapse of order, mocking your highest aspirations. The key is not to repress him, but to integrate him. Become the jester in your own court. Build a little chaos and novelty into your life. Admit mistakes, laugh at yourself, and give the sacred fool a seat at your table. Archetypes are neutral patterns, like empty riverbeds. But when we get stuck, they become rigid, obsessive, and all-consuming. The fifth place, toxic archetypes, the tyrant and the victim, and the hero's refusal. The tyrant and the victim are two sides of a toxic coin, one obsessed with control, the other lost in helplessness. The tyrant imprisons himself and others in a world of fear and control. The victim surrenders all agency, blaming the world for their suffering. Together, they're locked in a dance of destruction, sometimes within a single person. The antidote is the hero, the one who faces chaos, takes responsibility, and refuses both tyranny and victimhood. You must choose to be the hero of your own story, or risk being trapped in a tragedy of your own making. Now let's talk about the sixth place, the ascent into delusion and the nemesis of reality. Jung called it inflation of the ego, a psychological Icarus story. It's not just arrogance, but a dangerous expansion of the self, losing touch with reality. The ego, tasting power, confuses its small candle of consciousness with the sun. Floating on self-importance, we become blind to the world's hard truths. The Greeks called the force that corrects this hubris Nemesis, reality itself reasserting its dominance. When the ego inflates, reality rushes in to fill the vacuum, often painfully. But this crisis is also an opportunity to find humility, to build on solid ground, and to walk the path of genuine strength. We now confront the seventh place, one of the most terrifying prospects of the human condition, the loss of the self. In Jungian thought, the self is the totality of the psyche, the archetype of wholeness. To lose contact with this core is to become a ghost in your own life, a hollow man, functionally alive but empty inside. To lose contact with this core is to become a ghost in your own life, a hollow man, functionally alive but empty inside. You may achieve all the markers of success, yet feel nothing. The victories are hollow, belonging to a false self. The journey back is a pilgrimage into your own soul, confronting all you have denied. This is the hardest work a human can do, yet it is the only work that can restore meaning and bring the soul back to the center of your existence. The eighth place, repression of instincts, the caged animal, and the unruly return. Our modern world teaches us to repress our instincts, to deny the animal within. But what we bury does not disappear. It festers in the basement of the psyche, gathering dark energy. Think of your instincts as a powerful animal inside you. If you starve and cage it, it becomes a monster. Sooner or later, the caged animal breaks free, no longer a source of vitality, but a force of chaos. Healing means facing the animal, opening the cage, and learning to honor and integrate its energy. When instincts are respected, they become a source of wisdom, power, and the joy of being fully alive. The ninth place is the externalized shadow and the Anima/Animus illusion, projection traps. Projection is a subtle trap of the psyche, a way of disowning the parts of ourselves we find too painful to confront. We cast our own shadow onto others, blaming them for what we refuse to see within. This is the engine of scapegoating, of conflict, of seeing monsters out there instead of within. In love, we project our inner ideals, our anima or animus, onto partners, falling for a fantasy, not a real person. But the illusion always shatters. To escape, we must withdraw our projections, see others as they truly are, and begin the difficult work of self-integration. Only then can genuine love and growth emerge from the wreckage of illusion. The 10th place is the tyranny of the unconscious script and the call to conscious living, falling into unconscious patterns. The greatest trap is living on autopilot, ruled by unconscious patterns, habits and scripts written long ago. We think we're making choices, but often we're just repeating the past, following grooves carved deep within us. These patterns feel natural, even inevitable, but they quietly erode our true potential. To break free, we must wake up, become observers of our own lives, question our motives, and shine a light into the forgotten corners of our minds. Conscious living is an ongoing, courageous act. It means taking the wheel, breaking old chains, and choosing to become who you truly are. The choice, as always, is yours. We have journeyed together through the labyrinth of the psyche, mapping some of its most treacherous landscapes. We have stared into the abyss of the shadow, felt the suffocation of the persona, and witnessed the peril of ego inflation. From the seductive chaos of the trickster to the silent tyranny of unconscious patterns, we have seen how the mind itself can forge the chains of our own destruction. These are not mere intellectual curiosities. They are real and present dangers, lurking within each of us, waiting for a moment of inattention, a lapse in consciousness to pull us under. The purpose of this exploration is not to instill fear, but to arm you with a map. For you cannot avoid a pitfall you do not know exists. You cannot navigate a storm without first understanding the nature of the winds and the currents. To journey safely through the mind, we must first recognize its dangers. We must learn to identify the siren calls of our own unintegrated parts, to see the mirages our projections create, and to feel the subtle pull of ancestral patterns. This awareness is the lantern you must carry into the darkness of your own inner world. It is your only true protection. So I ask you to reflect deeply. Which of these places have you visited? In which of these traps have you found yourself entangled? Have you worn the mask of the persona for so long you've forgotten the face beneath? Have you projected your own negativities onto those you claim to love? Have you been living a script written for you by the ghosts of your past? Recognizing the trap is the first and most critical step toward freedom. The question that follows is the one that will define the next chapter of your life. Will you find your way back? The journey is long, and the path is not always clear. It requires courage, humility, and a willingness to confront the most difficult truths about yourself. But it is the most meaningful journey a human being can undertake. It is the path toward integration, toward authenticity, toward becoming the individual you were meant to be. Do not turn away from this task. Do not fall back asleep. The potential for a life of meaning and substance is at stake. Remember, the path to wholeness begins with awareness. It begins now. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Which of these 10 Jungian places do you think is the most dangerous, and why? Subscribe for more Jung-inspired psychology and check out the next video on screen. It'll take you even deeper